I'm Brodor, and this is a Why We Game product review. In this video, I'm going to tackle John Harper's Blades in the Dark, but before I do, I need to apologize to John. In a recent recording of Fear the Boot's actual play, in which we're playing Blades in the Dark, I crapped all over the game. In fact, I said I hated it, and that's not fair, nor is it really accurate. The truth is, I was ignorant. I didn't understand the game, at least to the degree that I understand it today. And to be fair, from the beginning, we told the audience that we were playing a more stripped down, homebrew, hacked version of the game. And there were a lot of the game's contents that we weren't engaging with. But I felt like I wasn't producing a good product when I took over running the game from Chad Watler. So I wanted to understand the game, and I wanted to run it quote unquote correctly. So I reread and I dug in, I watched videos, I re-listened to our actual plays, both that I participated in and that I ran the game. I watched John Harper run the game, and frankly, this was not my first exposure. I actually was completely enamored by the version of the game called Band of Blades, and I ran that prior to running the Blades in the Dark game with my buddies at Fear the Boot. So I don't have a lot of excuses. I guess for me it was more akin to physics in high school. It was really the first subject that I just did not grok. But unlike physics, I give a shit about role-playing games, and I really wanted to get it, and I felt like I was doing the game some level of disservice. So I doubled down and I tried to get a lot more exposure to the game so I could better understand it. And I think I've tackled what I don't dig about the game. First and foremost, the Game Master is completely reactive, save for fortune rolls. You're never even going to pick up dice. Every time you're engaging with players or environment that's not a role-play situation, it is reactionary. But I'll get to that when I get to the dice mechanic. I am used to proactively driving the story, and I game with people who are generally reactive gamers. And this game is really designed for the proactive, not alpha gamer per se, but the person who is the game master and who enjoys their portion of spotlight, someone who really wants to drive the narrative. But the game also has no action economy to speak of. It doesn't have rounds or turns or what have you. Because the game master is completely reactive in their role, for the most part, the player characters are driving the narrative, and so if they succeed, we talk about what success means. If they fail, we talk about what failure means. And oftentimes when the players are going to fail, they're going to find themselves in a bad or worse circumstance than they were previously. In addition, they may suffer an injury or a social slight, something of that nature. But there's no I get X number of actions, free actions, bonus actions, etc. per turn. It doesn't have anything that drives like that. So you don't know who goes when. And so as a game master, I've never really experienced just kind of sitting back and letting the players go. And I wasn't juggling the spotlight very well at all. With that said, the dice mechanic is totally unique, and it flummoxed me. And the dice mechanic actually blends the action economy, everything that the game master is going to do responsively in the environment, with the players, to the players, etc., is all interpreted on a single die scaling from 1 to 6. Dude, I just I couldn't wrap my head around it. What I'm used to is something like a D20 system where we're going to figure out positive and negative modifiers. We're ultimately going to have a number that we're going to add to a D20. It's open-ended, higher is better. We know what a critical hit is. We know what a critical fumble is. We move on, right? Or say Shadowrun, where you roll a huge pile of 6-sided dice, you pluck out all your 5s and 6s, the more you pluck out, the better it is. Or a percentile system like Call of Cthulhu, where I have a skill, the higher the number, the higher percentage, the better it is. I want to roll below it, and there are rules for degrees of success for how far below my skill I actually roll, and if I roll above it, or if I roll a critical failure, right? It all makes sense, even though it's only spanning from 1 to 100. But what Blades in the Dark, or the Forged in the Dark mechanic, do that is different, everything is going to drive on a single die. So if you roll 4 or 5 dice, you end up only pulling 1 die out, and that success or failure is interpreted on that single die. But it's even simpler than that. On a 1 to 3 is failure with consequence. A 4 or 5 is success with some kind of consequence or drawback. Success, or 6, is a success without consequence, and 2 or more 6s is extra success or a crit. Wicked, wicked simple. But what I didn't get is, in other games, we have a great understanding of the conditions of the situation for the player, the NPC, the monster, everything conceptually or physically on the table before dice are ever picked up. And we also take for granted what the effect, impact, consequences are going to be for success and failure. We all know that if my sword hits, it hits. If it crits, it does more damage. If I'm using fumble rules, I may drop it, or it could break, or what have you. Those things really have informed my entire gaming tradition. Even though it may skew with different dice mechanics, we always discuss the condition prior to the roll, look at what bonuses or penalties that may apply, and we all have, for the most part, a pretty solid understanding about what success and failure look like. But in Blades in the Dark, you literally negotiate both sides of the die roll before the dice are picked up, and then the players have all these cool little levers and buttons that they can interact with to impact those consequences, both for success and failure. It's really simple, it's quite elegant, and it took me forever to really understand how the game is supposed to run properly. Now, I'm not going to talk about how the game is written or laid out, or that I find it confusing, because honestly, I really do believe that this learning impediment is on me. I just think it was so new and innovative relative to the type of game that I've played before that I didn't, like I said, I didn't grok. However, I'm excited to run the game now that I have a little bit better of an understanding. I can't teach you how to play the game here, but what I can tell you is, looking at both sides of the roll, as the game master and the player is going to describe what they want to do. They're going to say what skill and their skill set that they want to use to affect the world. And then the game master is going to say, well, okay, you're in a controlled position. You're a sniper with great camouflage and a scope at a wonderful distance, and you've got wonderful intelligence and reconnaissance, and you have the jump on the target, right? Or it's a standard thing. You're in the street, you're about to get mugged, you're outnumbered, and you want to convince the thugs to not beat you and take your money, but just take your money. It's a risky situation, but you guys can handle yourselves in a fight, so no real serious great disadvantage for you, right? So you're risky. Then there is desperate, where the individual who you're fighting is a monstrosity of some kind or a ghost, and you don't have the proper incantations or sacred daggers or spells to affect it. And so your situation is quite desperate, and if you fail, you're very likely to suffer some tremendous injury or harm at the hands of this creature, right? So then, once we understand where the player and the game master both stand relative to the narrative, you look at what the effect is going to be, and you say, well, if you succeed, you're going to have a lesser effect because of the monstrosity's armor and your lack of the appropriate weapons. Even if you do land a wound with your pistol, you still aren't going to do it really great harm, so you're going to have a reduced effect. Or going back to the sniper example, the sniper could say, well, what is my effect going to be? And you say, well, you know, it's a standard effect. You're hitting somebody in the head with a sniper rifle. That seems, well, actually, no, you know what? Never mind. That's not appropriate. That's a great effect. You're right. I was wrong as the game master. That seems a great effect. You've got the ambush. You're in controlled position. You're going to do great effect. But consider that you are using a tier 1 sniper rifle and the carriage is tier 3, meaning that even if you have a good effect or a great effect, you're going to do lesser damage because it's such a greater level of quality equipment, higher than what you're using. So then the player says, well, can I go from controlled to risky? Can I actually risk showing my position or risk some sort of retaliation or some sort of greater failure? And the game master considers it and says, sure, how about this? They see where your muzzle flashes and they're going to respond in kind, but if you succeed, you're going to have not just a standard, but a greater success. So you're actually going to do some damage and possibly break through the armor of the carriage and actually assassinate the noble that you're trying to assassinate, right? So there's this wonderful balance back and forth where both sides of the table get to negotiate and talk about success and failure, scale, quality of equipment, the tier of skill between one combatant or debater than another. It's super, super elegant. It just, I just couldn't do it at first. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity to get back to the game and run it right, so to say. But there's more to the game, right? Besides the wonderful art, the great layout, the language, the world building, even though I find it kind of confusing and difficult to interpret, I think it's worth picking up because it's so innovative. But it also has some super slick ideas and concepts that other games aren't doing. So in addition to your character and your character archetype and your character sheet or playbook, you as a group collectively have a crew sheet, a crew archetype, and crew skills and different benefits and, you know, keeping track of your wealth, your stash, things like that. So not only are you building an individual character and a narrative for those characters, but you're also building the qualities and the reputation of your particular gang in the city. It's super, super slick. But there's a lot more depth to it. A number of great different mini games that are in there. For example, if you guys get pinched and you go to prison, there's all sorts of cool stuff you can do with the party while in prison. There's a turf sheet where you keep track of the turf that your characters have or that your crew has, how you're expanding and contracting based on, you know, different rivalries between different gangs. You chart your relationships with all the different gangs in the city. It's really, really, really cool. And in the AP that I'm involved in, we're not really digging into that stuff. So there's a lot there that if you're paying attention to the AP, you're not going to get exposed to that's really slick and certainly worth exploring, even if it's just for a rules wank. Going back to the game the next time we record the AP, now that I have a greater understanding about the rules, I hope I'm going to do a better job of adjudicating those rules and helping to drive the narrative through the players. I also want to give special thanks to Ant on the Fear the Boot Discord. If it weren't for you, I really would not have been inspired to reread the book and look at armor and see what I was doing wrong and how I was just leaving a huge pile of seeping foamy Duke all in the bed. So seriously, thank you very much, Ant, and go to your FLGS or drive-through or wherever it is that you buy your stuff. Check it out. Please subscribe to the Influence Foundation YouTube channel. Proselytize to your friends. Send this to John Harper and let him know that I'm sorry for being a dick.